You're regarded as one of the greatest authors to ever live. Then you pass away, leaving behind a final masterpiece without its long-awaited ending. What now? The answer, it seems, is nothing short of unbelievable.
It's June 1870 in Kent, England. Charles Dickens is trying his hand at writing a whodunit, a thriller. He calls it The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and he's keeping tight-lipped about the details. Dickens is one of the most popular writers of the day. He's written Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, among many others. Drood is Dickens' 15th novel, but his first mystery. And it's being published in serialized form, in installments.
Before publishing that much-anticipated ending, revealing the killer's identity, Dickens suffers a stroke and dies.
Of course, the world is mourning the death of a great author, but the public is still hungry for more. Dickens takes the finale and the murderer to his grave.
Just 2 years after Dickens' passing, across the pond, there's a printer living in Brattleboro, Vermont. 30-year-old Thomas Powers James, or TP for short. TP moves into a boarding house, and his landlady is a big believer in spiritualism and invites him into her weekly seance, which is held in her parlor.
On the night of the seance, TP is handed a pen and a sheet of paper. He is told that, on occasion, spirits will speak through a living person in a process called automatic writing. In essence, you have become the spirit's hands, their vessel.
TP closes his eyes and soon feels the pen moving on its own.
When he opens his eyes, he's astounded. TP had written down information about all of these strangers, things he couldn't possibly have known. The locals are pretty impressed, so they invite TP back the next week, and he agrees.
Again, TP begins automatic writing. This time, the spirit introduces himself. And you won't believe his identity.
It's none other than Charles Dickens.
The attendees are blown away, and so is TP, who, by the way, has no formal education and not a literary bone in his body. TP meets with this landlady's seance circle a third time. But this time, TP reports that Dickens has asked him for a great favor.
TP has been commanded by the spirit of Charles Dickens himself to finish the mystery of Edwin Drood. But the ghost has one more demand. It all must commence on the night of Christmas Eve.
TP agrees, and on the night of December 24th, he retires to a dark, private room to finish Dickens' final chapter.
According to TP, when he settles in his chair and closes his eyes, he feels an icy hand on his hand. Dickens is taking over. TP begins writing furiously. The story just comes pouring out. But apparently the collaboration does not go smoothly. The two men have a spirited debate.
The people outside his door claim that they can hear two men arguing, one of them TP and one of them Charles Dickens, who's angry at TP for his creative input in the story, which obviously Dickens does not like. Word gets out about these nightly arguments, and critics speculate that perhaps TP isn't communing with spirits, but rather drinking them.
In spite of the critics, finally on October 25th, 1873, T.P. James completes the work and turns in 1,200 pages of a manuscript for publication.
The publisher is thrilled with all the free publicity. He puts out this handsome leather-bound volume of the book, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, by Charles Dickens and Thomas Powers James. The book is a hit in America. But the Brits aren't so quick to believe TP's story of Dickens asking him to finish his final masterpiece. They accuse TP of being a poser, a fraud, and a bad writer to boot.
However, there is one surprising ally who comes to TP's defense.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, of Sherlock Holmes fame, is a proponent of spiritualism, and he thinks the work is a masterpiece.
Doyle swears that this book doesn't just read like Dickens, it is authentic Dickens. He says that Dickens would be really offended by all this criticism.
Back in Brattleboro, T.P. James is offered commissions to write more books, even another by Dickens. But he refuses and fades into obscurity. Dickens' legacy, however, endures.
We're in turn-of-the-century Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Carrie House, who is a nurse, and her doctor husband, Thomas, have a 3-month-old premature baby named Tommy, and he's not doing very well. In fact, they don't know if little Tommy's gonna make it through the night.
Because they're in the medical profession, Carrie and her husband actually have lots of doctors in the house on this critical night to see if they can save little Tommy. But there's no consensus. They start arguing about what to do next. But Carrie's not ready to give up. She's ready to try anything, including something pretty unconventional.
Carrie calls in her cousin, Edgar Casey, to help.
He has no medical training. In fact, he's not a doctor at all. But Edgar has been able to diagnose ailments in his sleep. He can close his eyes, go into a trance, and tell you what is physically wrong with people, sometimes without touching them at all.
When Edgar arrives, he doesn't waste any time. Without so much as a glance at Tommy, he simply finds a quiet spot and preps for sleep.
Right before Edgar closes his eyes, he tells Tommy's father to take some notes. According to Edgar, he can never remember what he says during these trances. And then, Edgar begins to enter this hypnotic trance.
First, Edgar gives a rundown of all the vital signs: blood pressure, heart rate. When it's compared to the actual readings, he's bang on. Then Edgar describes the child's condition as if he's somehow seeing the organs in his mind's eye. He says the child has some sort of epileptic condition that causes extreme nausea and vomiting.
Then comes the very bizarre solution.
Edgar says that Tommy should be given a dose of belladonna, a very poisonous and toxic herb, and then wrapped in a hot poultice, and this will help draw out the toxin. When Edgar wakes up, he can hear the doctors and the family, and they're having a big argument.
Carrie, Tommy's mother, really wants to try this. She's all in. The doctors, even her husband, are telling her, you will kill this child. This is murder if you administer this high level of belladonna. Carrie reminds them that they have literally tried everything else and nothing has worked. So essentially she says, if I have to poison my son to save him, that's what I'm gonna do.
Almost immediately after taking the belladonna, Tommy's seizures stop, and he falls into what seems to be a deep sleep. Then Tommy wakes up. He is drenched in sweat, but his cheeks are pink, and he's breathing normally. Edgar Casey probably saved his life.
News of his talent quickly spreads, and soon Edgar Casey becomes a household name.
Everyone wants a piece of Edgar. Everyone wants him to diagnose them, including Woodrow Wilson, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla. And so he kind of becomes this medical rock star.
Out of profound gratitude, Carrie and Thomas House built a hospital in Virginia Beach to focus on the treatments Edgar channeled during his readings. Casey's last reading was for himself in September of 1944, and he told himself that it was time to rest. Only 4 months later, he dies of a stroke.